So Monger moves to approve the agenda as modified.
Get a second?
Second.
Kelly's got a second there. I think I heard her chime in. So hearing that, any other discussion? All those signify by saying aye to approve the agenda.
Aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, next item. Review and approve the March 10, 2021 minutes. If there are no suggestions, I will entertain someone to give us a motion here.
Kelly moves to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Thank you, Kelly.
Second, Chuck Roby.
Thank you, Chuck. Discussion, anything? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, thank you. Item 5 on our agenda. Public input. Do we have any? April, did you receive any? I know I have not.
I haven't.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience with us today that would like to visit with our with the Basin Roundtable? All right, hearing none, let's move on. Item 6, we're Director Mitchell asked, this has been planning in the works for quite some time to visit with our group, and I don't see her specifically here. Oh, there she is. She popped in. So with that, Director Mitchell, you have our undivided attention and the floor. Welcome.
Well, that makes me so happy. First and foremost, it's horrible to see some of my favorite people this way, but it's better to see them this way than no way at all. So I am at least glad that we can still get together. And to be perfectly honest, it's a little bit easier for me to visit all the roundtables in this format. I hate to say it, but it is a little bit easier to get around the state in this format rather than the previous. Doesn't mean I don't wish we were back where we were a little over a year ago and handling things that way. But one of the things that I wanted to make sure I brought up was that we seem to still be moving forward and making sure that the work is still moving on, much thanks to you all on the ground. So that being said, I have to thank you for your time and work that you've already put into the Basin Implementation Plan update. Some of you are around for the first one, and I was there. I was around for those too, and I know that they are a lot of hard work, and but it is the most important work. I often say that it is the heart of the water plan, and these local. The local driven kind of mission as we move forward is really what the water plan's about. And so it wouldn't be possible without this work. And so just as a reminder, that information that you're providing, it is critical, and we don't want to do it without you. It's so critical as we develop the solutions, the partnerships, the projects. All of those are going to help meet our future water needs, and that is no more important now than it has ever been when we think about kind of the situation that we're in this year, specifically with hydrology. We know that the solutions that come out of these basin implementation plans are the solutions of the future. So that better project data helps us understand like the full costs, and I think anybody who's been to the legislature knows that that's the kind of information that we need as we're talking about getting money on the ground for the people, is that and for the good work that needs to be done. That project data is incredibly important, because that will always be the first question we're asked. Well, what is this going to be spent on? What kind of projects? How diverse of an area is it in terms of across the state, not just targeted in one area? And so the work that you're doing helps us do that. I know that there's some deadlines coming up with the draft and the projects list by June 30th. That's a lot of work. as an FYI, we've allotted a little more time than we did in the last go round. So not saying that it's easier this go round than the last go round, but we know that it's a lot for the volunteers and appreciate your dedication. And it's critical in the way that we move forward. And remember that all feeds up into the water plan. One of the things that we learned in the last water plan that that I think will be forever how we do business is that that we need to make sure that we're taking input across the state, and that really when we talk about a water plan by the people for the people, the only way to do that is to include all the people. And so one of the benefits of COVID, and those of you who know me probably know that I am a half full as much as possible kind of person. One of the benefits though is that we've been able to really target folks, because we're using some of this technical forums, and so we're able to get out in a way that we may not have been. Again, that doesn't say that on the ground is not the most important. Just so I give you a little bit of my perspective, I've thought for the staff at CWCB, this year has been extremely difficult, because what we're most passionate about is being on the ground, seeing things happen, and that's been difficult this year. But we're trying to make do with these social forums and the computer. I absolutely hate it if you haven't figured that out, but I will deal with it for as long as we have to deal with it. We did have that Riverside chat in January. It went over really well, and we had a lot of participation. We're going to have another one, Riverside chat 2 on June 8th. And you can register for all of those. We've already had some workshops, and then we have some upcoming workshops that include climate change and the agricultural workshop. I think we just had those. And then we'll also be holding a public comment period on the water plan update draft in early to mid 2022. I know when folks see me that they want to talk about the water plan. We want to talk about the work that we're doing at the state. We want to talk about the work that you guys are doing on the ground. But a lot of times, mostly what people want to hear from me is talk about demand management or the Colorado River. And so I want to make sure I save just a few minutes for an update on demand management. I know Director Brown's probably been updating you from the board standpoint and really letting you know what's going on, but I want to make sure that I echo some of what's happened and what she's probably already told you, but make sure I say it too, is we adopted the step 2 demand management work plan. So the board adopted that, and that focuses on the framework, the straw man. It is not a demand management program. I repeat, it is not a demand management program, but it's rather, again, the tool to continue the discussions. I think Amy Ostick is here today, and so she'll be, I think, talking today. I'm not sure. If it's not today, I'm sure it's at your next upcoming meeting. But and then there's also public survey available on the engagecwcb.org/demand management. So if you have any comments that you want to make sure get addressed, get talked about, get in as part of the discussion, that's a good way to do it. You can always tell me, you can always tell the staff, you can always do that, but really it's a good documented way to do things, and it helps us as we move forward. Also, another one of the topics that gets discussed every time I get out is our water equity task force. And really, I want to make sure that I clarify and make sure I'm really clear about what that equity task force is and isn't about. It's not about the public trust doctrine. It's not about demand management. It's not about digging into water rights issues. It's really about opening up the conversations, trying to open the conversations up between roundtables and people that may not even know what a roundtable is. And it's really at the simplest level trying to broaden the tent, and the folks at CWCB tease me because I always say, let's make the tent bigger. Let's make the tent bigger. If we want different solutions, we have to invite different people to the room. And so this is really what this is about. It's definitely something that we feel like is a way to make us better as we look to the future. As we think about Colorado, we commonly deal with about 400 regular stakeholders. We talk to, and most of them are on this call that from this space, and I can see right now. And so I think there's 50 people right now. You guys are the active group, right? And so that is a good thing, and that's really important. It's important that we always rely on that, but it's also important to remember that there are 5.7 million Coloradans in the state, and so we are looking to for ways to do a better job of reaching a broader group of stakeholders, and promote grant programs and share updates that and get input where it's needed. And so that's really the goal of this. We really, the makeup of that task force is really intended to create a healthy blend of our existing and legislative defined basin stakeholder groups, tribal reps, and new voices from across the state. So it doesn't supersede this group. I want to make sure that everyone knows it. We'll be looking at equity, diversity, and inclusivity through a broad lens. It's not limited to just racial equity. It's really to think about just being more inclusive as we look towards the future, and as we look towards our next version of the water plan. You've probably also heard some updates on a code of conduct that we sent. That's not to say anybody is behaving badly, especially in this basin, but really taking a look. And I think I've learned a lot through this last year. And one of the things that's I feel has been very apparent is that people are tired, and sometimes they're tired of the forums that we're speaking on, and sometimes it empowers people to be more abrasive. I'm not saying that's a problem in the Yampa, but DNR has a code of ethics, and we just wanted to make sure that we have a shared responsibility to have open meetings, make sure people feel welcome. And when we think about some of the tough conversations that we are about to have, or are in the middle of them, whether that's the update of the water plan, whether that's demand management, whether it's the drought that we're currently in, whether it's about the negotiations of the post 2026 operations of Powell Mead, all of those tough conversations, we need to make sure that we're respectful as we're having that. So even in our most heated discussions, the code of conduct is intended to make sure that we continue to treat others with respect. So you can choose to not formally adopt this. It's up to you. I urge you to really seriously think about it, and I value it. I think it's important to me, but it'll still be a CWCB policy document that we use to set roundtable expectations moving forward. And I just want to make sure you are aware of that. You probably also have questions on where we are with budget. If you have been watching anything, you've probably been hearing about the budget situation. We're trying to make the best of it. And there's been some confusion around the DD funding and where and when the DD dollars will show up. And so they just so that I'm really clear, those end up in the water plan grant program, not WSRF. And so while those have been collected, remember, we have to go back to the legislature to appropriate that, or to get approval basically to spend them. So that will be happening in the next session. But we have some money to get us through until then. So we're continuing to work with the legislature to maximize any funding resources that may be out there, whether it be stimulus funds, whether it be emergency funding for wildfires and things like that. And that's definitely been a priority. I know that you guys may have some questions. I want to make sure I leave as much opportunity for that. That's what I enjoy. I prefer that over me just talking. But I wish we could be in person, especially when I see some of the backgrounds. Some of them are, just regular offices, but some of them are beautiful. And so I wish I could be there. We will as soon as we can be. And if you guys could make the next roundtable meeting that I get invited to in the middle of winter so I can ski, that would be better. So, because Steamboat is one of my favorites. Any questions? Am I allowed to ask that, Alden?
Absolutely, because I think do you want to ask us questions, or is it our turn to ask you questions?
You can ask me questions, but I did want to ask about, I haven't fully digested the policy statement on demand management from the Yampa Basin that I think has come out. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, but I'd also want to be available for questions too.
I know I would divert that to Tom Gray and
we can also save it for when Amy gets on. She's probably better too.
and that might be more appropriate. I don't know, because I know we had that conversation last night, and Jeff Myers and Tom Gray have spent an enormous amount of time in that, are probably the two most knowledgeable people that I got within our Basin Roundtable group on that subject. So I don't want to steal any of their thunder, because these guys, they're our experts on this. So and they represent the IBCC and carried that message forward to them. So Tom, Jeff, do you have anything you would like to add this time about that? Or would you rather wait till we get to Amy, or what do you want to do?
If not, I have another question.
Yeah, I think Tom ought to give a little overview real quickly of how we got where we are.
I think so, I guess. Well, we got where we are. We vetted and created our principles, presented them, as you know, Becky, and we're now in the process that with the framework out there of taking a deep dive into the framework and shining the light of our principles on the various options and the various categories to make some comments or have some input. We talked about it in our Big River Committee last night, that and we'll be really careful. It's not just an opinion thing. We're going to be very careful to keep with our principles and say, these are the principles we adopted. And as we go through the framework, be able to just give input to you guys to say, okay, option A in this category would not or will fit within our principles. We like it, or we think that can't be one of the options that can get picked because that's not in accordance with our principles. And that's kind of where we're headed. I think Alden has an ask here, or we talked about that also last night on that subject, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that.
I guess this is Jeff. I would just like to add that getting 33, 34, 35 people to sign on the dotted line for an important topic like demand management and the expression of what's important to our basin isn't so easy, Director Mitchell. But the Big River Committee in particular, I think kind of is the definitive source for what you were talking about in terms of civil, sometimes heated discussion around a difficult topic and respectfully disagreeing and really grinding on that thing. So that group of people in particular, the Yampa-White-Green River Committee is just, it's an amazing group to work with, and they just did an amazing thing.
Thank you for that, Jeff. I do think getting 35 people to sign on the dotted line of anything is difficult. 5.7 million is even harder, but I think that is a huge feat, and I know those conversations are have to be heated at some points, and that's because what we do is so incredibly important, and we have to remember that. And just so you know, like I do firmly believe that the staff, while sometimes we may be tired and sometimes we may feel beaten down or worn out, that the work that is happening, like here, the big river committee that you have, the work that we're doing, there is so much relying on that, and there's so much at stake. And so it's important that we take good hard looks at it, and that we critically look at things to make sure that we don't make mistakes. As we had some grave concerns about some of the news articles that came out about speculation and things like that, you know, again, the half full mantra that I try to carry, I was like, well, thank goodness it came out now rather than later, as a way that works within a system. Instead, we get to, if we have an opportunity to set up a structure that really says, okay, what is the values that we're trying to portray? What are the goals that we're trying to get with whatever we're doing, whether it's demand management, whatever it is. When we know some of the threats and concerns earlier on, I think we create a better product. And I'm not saying anything negative one way or the other, but knowing, okay, what is the ultimate goal? And that's a better Colorado future. That's, you know, secure water. That's making sure that we have viable agriculture. It's the values that we expressed in the water plan. Those values will continue to hold true. And so I think when we have those heated discussions, it's because it's about an important topic. I think the most important topic in the state. Some people may disagree with me. I think it's the most important topic in the state. Everybody relies on water. Everybody.
Yes. Okay, next question. I want to kind of keep the conversation rolling here if I could, please. Deirdre, you messaged me that you have a question, and then I have a follow-up question as well, and we'll probably have to move on with our agenda because we do have several items here as well, Director Mitchell. I'm sure you understand. So, Deirdre, you have the floor right now?
Thanks, Alden. Rebecca, thanks for joining us tonight. And I may be incorrect, but my understanding is the 5 different scenarios come from CWCB, and we've been wading through the BIP process, helped ably by our consultants. And my question to you is, as we've moved forward, realizing, by the way, that COVID has really thrown a curveball into planning, economics, population growth, et cetera, has CWCB discussed taking a look at narrowing down the scenarios and coming up with maybe 1 or 2 that are the most likely, given what we're seeing happen in the state and around the world? Because I think the complexity that 5 different scenarios makes it a little bit harder for those of us who are trying to read through these documents and come away with a clear sense of what good planning is. So my question is there any discussion about narrowing down 5 different scenarios, which are pretty, all quite different, as we've begun to get a sense of population growth, the oil and gas industry, the growth or the decline of agriculture, et cetera? Thank you, Rebecca.
Oh, no, and thank you for that, Deirdre. That's a great question. And one of the things that I reflected on when you asked that question is I happened to be there when those scenarios were developed, and they were developed through a kind of a process that was similar to how the water plan went through, and it came from organically through the IBCC. And so that process of developing those scenarios wasn't intended to lock us in to one scenario. That was never, when we look at planning for the future, if COVID didn't show us this, I don't know what would, that we really cannot predict. And so the scenarios were there to be able to kind of see what direction we're going and if there's a way to shift things earlier on. And so I think originally there were it was narrowed down from 37 original portfolios down to 5. But I also want you to remember that those are broken down within those into whether there's some social values, things like that. It's almost the pieces in there that are more important than the scenarios. And if we're going a certain way, what I can guarantee you, Deirdre, is that we won't be hitting any one of those exactly. That's one thing I can tell you for certain, that our future at any given point will not be one of those exactly. It will probably be some combination. And that's why there's multiple kind of scenarios to look at, because there's many levers. I kind of feel like it's almost like operating a complicated water system. There's many levers, and pulling one may adjust another. And so I have to say I appreciate you being willing to kind of dive through all of those. I don't know, Russ, if I need to add any more. I probably talked too much as it relates to that. We did that through somewhat of a public process. It would be hard to say, we don't like all the input and we're going to take only half of it. I think that would be a hard thing, but Russ, can you add anything on that?
No, I think you nailed it. That's right. I mean, it's a recognition, I think, in the heart of scenario planning is that we don't know what the future is. It will be on many, along one of those paths, but we don't know which. It's kind of a way of looking at the difference between, I often think it's not about one scenario over the other. It's the differences, the spaces between. So when we look at the hot growth scenario, excuse me, we have the highest climate change, we have the highest population growth, but it's really about what the difference is between the next scenario that has all those same features, but also has a lot of conservation. And so the message there then is, well, conservation is showing us it's lowering the gap. So showing us the way to maybe think about how we strategically invest. And so there's these stories that emerge maybe in the spaces between scenarios. And it's also kind of hard not to think about what happened this last year and just think about, weak economy is one of the scenarios that doesn't have the highest degree of climate change or population growth. So it may be more about how we rethink those scenarios moving forward, and if we need to create different stories of the future. But that's the essence of scenario planning.
And I would like to throw out the hot growth one, but unfortunately, it may be something that's in our future. And I'd also like to throw out weak economy, and we're there. So, hopefully we don't stay there. Hopefully we move off of some of those.
Thank you. I do have one. I know last night there was, not just last night, that was just one conversation, but it's been brought to my attention about the importance of our Basin Roundtable recorder position that we have. I know Russ and Sam have been instrumental in working through that. April, she's here with us. I know we just recently brought on Megan Kuzi. She's with us here tonight. But I can't express the importance of how important a recorder is to our Basin Roundtable and helping keep us organized along with our committees to stay organized. Because you've got about 34 water misfits around here, and most of us are volunteers, and we devote an awful lot of time to this. And if there's a way that we could include additional budgeting, additional opportunities to keep those a recorder intricately involved with our Basin Roundtable, because they really do keep us organized, and they work. I work closely with them. As a matter of fact, prior to April, I was the recorder for about 18 months, and I did not enjoy that. I mean,
It's not a great job, is it, Alden?
no, and I was terrible at it because my
It's
notes
hard
were
to hurt these people.
yeah, mine was on a spiral notebook, and I didn't have to go through all these tasks. But with the CWCB going through and the state moving through all these water issues that we have now, the level of involvement from the Basin Roundtable continues to grow, and making sure that we adequately do as you described to make sure that we maintain the requirements of Colorado Sunshine Law. It's really imperative that we get the assistance from the state to properly obtain and retain a recorder for our group. So anything that you can do to help keep that moving forward would really be beneficial. Really, I cannot express that enough. And as a matter of fact, we have others that are volunteering to help us on our big meetings like we have tonight. We have 52. That's actually a smaller turnout for us. We have had meetings where we've had upwards of 90 in participation. And getting all that organized is a feat. And if you will take a moment at some point, and maybe if you would like to review the minutes that we carry for our meeting, they're very detailed.
Oh yeah, I've seen them.
Very
And
detailed.
I appreciate them. So
Absolutely. And that's kind of where we want to make sure that we're doing our part to maintain that disclosure. So any support that you or the CWCB can extend to our Basin Roundtable recorders, duly appreciated. And if you want somebody to give a talk to other folks within your organization about it, I would be more than happy to offer that assistance up. So
Alden, thank you. And note taken, that's always been an important thing. And one of the things I had to say about why it's important that I want to make sure that I also touch on is that the work that we do is important that we learn from, the we that I see right now. But I also think that it's even more beneficial when others can learn from your work. And that's where documentation of the work is so important. I think about like our grant programs. It's not just about getting money to a project and getting good projects done. It's about getting money to a good project that maybe is creative and innovative, and then somebody else could do something similar or modify it to their own area, or it could be used again in your own area, or something like that. And that only happens if we're documenting it, if we're making folks aware of it, and we're organized around it. And so when we talk about progress, we have to know how far we've come, and the only way we can do that is by documenting where we were. And oftentimes I think, there's always the saying is, the progress in water moves at a glacial pace. And I think that's true in a lot of regards. But when you think about how much has been accomplished through the Basin Roundtable process, through the IBCC, and through the way that we have really modified how we work together with the water plan and the grants programs that have developed out of that, I feel like we need to be able to document that and make sure that folks know where these projects are happening, who's impacted, and we have this many agricultural projects, this many environmental projects, this many multiple multi-beneficial projects. All of that's important. The recorders are almost the most important people. I know everybody else, I know that's hard to hear, but the documentation of that and getting those messages out and making sure that we can show success is critical. So thank you for that, April. I hope they give you an award.
And that also includes for our committees, because we have several committees that need assistance. They organize too. So I see I got Ken over there. What you got on your mind, Ken?
I wanted to thank Becky. Becky, nice to see you. We'll be glad to take good care of you if you come up skiing. I wanted to thank you for your staff support for the BIP update. We haven't had a lot of interaction with the general contractors, but our local experts, the Wilson Water Group, as well as Consensus Building Institute, have done an excellent job and have really made this possible for us to do it on such a tight timeline. Thank you very much for that support.
Thank you. They love it, I promise.
Okay, anything else? Another maybe, because otherwise we're going to roll on because we've got Amy coming up next to continue on Director Mitchell's conversation. So Director Mitchell, thank you very much for sharing your time.
And I really apologize. I am going to jump off. I got one more commitment. I may jump back on if that's okay.
Yeah, we'll allow you back in.
Okay, thank you.
Good night, ma'am. Okay, with that, Amy, you're up. I know I may need some help to share a screen here.
I'll get it all.
So
up.
Okay, thank you.
I think if you could make me a co-host, I should be able to share my screen.
So I can kind of get us started while Emily gets her screen shared. Becky
That's
is
great.
a tough act to follow, but I'm going to do my best.
Amy, thanks for joining us again tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I just want to make clear, Emily's Mac is here with me tonight, and she'll kind of come in and introduce herself in just a second, but she's actually going to be sharing the PowerPoint and talking us through some things as well. So I don't know if you could make her a host or whatever needs to be done for that, that'd be great.
Not seeing how to do that.
I got her.
You got her.
Thank
She
you.
should be ready to go.
And here we go. Can everyone see that?
Yep, I can.
So thanks. We're here. I'm Emily's Mac, as Amy said, Emily's Mac with CDR Associates, and I've been helping Amy over the last year and a half, mostly on the education outreach piece of the feasibility investigation. But I also wear a second hat, and that's as a facilitator and a stakeholder engagement specialist. So we've been putting our heads together to be intentional in the groups that we're visiting and making sure that the state or the stakeholders who want to be involved have the opportunity to be involved. So with that, today, Amy and I are going to tee up what we hope is an ongoing conversation. So we'll talk about the demand management framework and the process, and Amy will walk us through that, the substance and how that substance is organized and captured. And then we also want to extend an invitation to continue engaging. We have both current ongoing opportunities to engage and a few upcoming workshops that we hope you'll attend. Because we only have about 15 minutes or so, our focus today is on the framework and the elements, the trade-offs, the considerations, the nuances that are captured within it. And this is in order to inform the CWCB board's decision-making and policy-making process. That said, we know there are a lot of varying degrees of comfort and familiarity with demand management. And so we want to hear any and all questions related to this. And as we walk you through the framework, we hope it'll make more and more sense and create a foundation for you to engage further at a future opportunity. So with that, unless there are any questions about our purpose and our process, I'm going to hand it over to Amy to walk us through the framework and the substance there.
Great, thanks so much, Emily. So I'm Amy Ostick. I think I know most, if not all of you, maybe. I'm with the Federal Interstate and Water Information Section at CWCB, and my work really focuses on Colorado River issues. And a lot of my focus lately, for a while now actually, has been on the demand management feasibility investigation. And as Emily said, we know that you all, there's kind of varied levels of engagement and interest in and all of that with demand management. Generally and the framework specifically. And I know that you all in particular probably have a lot more background on this than some other folks we talk to. So I do want to provide just a very brief introduction to demand management, or just a little bit of background, but I'm not going to labor that too much. But I do just want to make clear that, demand management, that term is kind of thrown around a lot. And what we're talking about today is kind of a term of art that comes from the Demand Management Storage Agreement, which is part of the drought contingency plan that the 7 Colorado Basin states adopted in 2019. And what this agreement allows for is the ability to establish a demand management program if and only if all the upper division states agree it's feasible, including Colorado. None of us can go it alone. And what it would essentially mean is establishment of a program of temporary voluntary compensated reductions in water use. And that water would ultimately be used to ensure ongoing compliance with the Colorado River Compact. So it would protect our state from the impacts of a potential curtailment scenario in the Colorado Basin. So that's kind of big picture what it is. I also just want to be really clear that demand management is only one part of the Colorado River discussion. It's only one potential tool in the toolkit. So there are a lot of other things going on, a lot of other discussions happening, and I don't want to minimize any of that, but we're focusing today on demand management. As a lot of you know, and a lot of you actually directly participated in, the first kind of step that our board took was to establish some work groups and start considering the key threshold issues associated with the demand management program. That was part of the 2019 work plan. And I should actually clarify that even before that, our board adopted this policy statement, the 2018 support and policy statement, that did a whole lot of things. But one thing of note that I think is really relevant today and generally in this discussion is the commitment to considering proportionality that is also kind of referred to sometimes as equity. But that commitment really is about making sure that there aren't any unintended adverse impacts to particular sectors or areas of the state. That's not the exact language, but the exact language is in our support and policy statement that was again adopted back in 2018, but continues to inform and kind of be a guiding principle to all of the work that we continue to do on this. So I just think it's really important to note that. So to go back to the 2019 work plan, the work groups were formed to look at these key threshold issues associated with demand management. All of that culminated in a big media report to our board that came out in July of 2020. There's a lot of information to digest, and the general consensus, I think what we heard a lot, is that it would be really helpful to have something to respond to. So to take all of that good work as kind of a foundation, build on it, and then create something of a straw person, something that people can look at, respond to, and actually discuss with more specificity than was possible before. So to that end, the board adopted a new work plan back in November that called for development of this framework, which was exactly that, kind of a straw man concept that is based on that work group input, board feedback, and really just the conversations that we had heard over the last year plus, almost 2 years across the state about demand management. So that's kind of what the framework is generally. And I'm just going to take a little bit of time now to walk through the framework and explain kind of how to engage with it. And I do want to be clear too that I know a lot of you probably already understand this stuff or thought about it or reviewed the framework. So I apologize if this is repeating any information for you, but we really want to make sure that everyone fully understands what it is and how to interact with it. So thank you, Emily. So this is the kind of high-level overview of what the framework is and how it works. The first thing to note is that we have subject matters organized roughly by work group. So for each of those subject matters, then we identified elements of feasibility. This is based on work group discussion, and these are the kind of key elements that would need to be figured out to make a demand management program work. Each work group, each subject matter has a few different elements of feasibility. And, for example, one in education and outreach would be, how do we make sure that people across the state know about demand management? What kind of public outreach are we engaging in to make sure that people are informed of the program? And, separately, to get people actually involved in the program, to get them signed up if they want to be. So those are the types of things we're looking at here. And then what you'll see for each of those elements of feasibility are implementation options ranging from A to C. Now in A, what you're going to see is a low complexity option. None of this is intended to be any value judgment or anything like that. It's just intended to show a range of complexity. So again, in A, you're going to see something maybe that's relying on existing programs that we already have set up, things like that. And in the C category, you're going to see a more built out, more complex option for implementation of that particular subject. So you can kind of take them apart, mix and match them, or you can look at if we were to do an all-A program, what that would mean, how much would it cost, things like that. And then all the way on the right, what you'll see, and I think that this is one of the more interesting, important parts of the framework, is interconnected issues and proportionality considerations. And this is just kind of a beginning of a list of some topics for discussion, honestly, and some potential issues that you might see if you were to choose one or the other of the implementation options. Not only issues, but potential benefits you might see if you select certain options. Also interconnected issues. So, you know, as we were, particularly as the work groups were meeting, it was noted, and it continues to be the case, that there's a lot of overlap. So if you look at one potential option in terms of, for example, looking at environmental considerations, that might have monitoring and verification implications. You might need a higher level monitoring verification option if you want to look at certain environmental factors. So that's where we're noting those types of things. It's also where we're noting proportionality considerations. So is there one implementation option that there might be a concern of some adverse impacts to one particular sector or area? So that's the kind of thing that we're looking at there. So that's the framework. And again, I want to be kind of clear that the whole goal here is to create a tool for discussion. Not a demand management program, as Becky said. I think it's always important to reiterate that. This is something that hopefully will give people something to talk about and respond to, so that in some cases we can take those really, really great statements that have been put together, thoughts that have kind of general thoughts about demand management that people have considered, and test them against something. That's exactly what this is for. So what's the next step? How are we going to use all this? That's kind of the next logical question. And ultimately, it's going to inform our board. So ultimately, the CWCB board will be the entity making the determination of whether demand management is feasible. And all of the input that we get through this is going to be really helpful to the board in helping to inform that decision. So that's kind of the end game here. So next steps, Emily and I have been to a few roundtables now, but we're just kind of initiating, or I guess now kind of in the middle of the engagement process on this first iteration of the framework. We'll continue to have these meetings and kind of make the rounds. We are targeting a few workshops in the future, and I think Emily will go over that a little bit more, and also talk about how what the next steps for you all are in terms of engaging with this. So I'll hand it over to Emily to go over those things, but first I'm happy to take any clarifying questions that people might have on the material I just went over. I know there was a lot there.
So I guess this is Monger. I guess the comment here is that we're at the beginning of the process. We appreciate that. We talked about this last night at our Big River Committee. And so we are going to be doing the work that we have had and apply it back to some of those principles that you guys have had, and we'll have some further input, I think, is what we came up with last night.
Great.
Other feedback? Questions? I know you'll be hearing more from us about this, Amy and Emily. So we're going back to our group and developing some more comments and feedback on this, but we're looking to be constructive. That's really where we're at, because we know we've got to work on this collaboratively. So that's really where we're going to be going as a group. So
thank you. And that might be the perfect segue into the engagement piece, unless there are any other questions on the substance, which we do want to hear. But the engagement opportunities are our way of partnering with you to dig in deep. And we know you can't do that in 15 minutes. So we do have a survey that's live right now, and I'll put that link in the chat in just a second, that is focused on some of the high level, big picture questions, your perceptions and what you think the benefits or impacts of demand management program might be that aren't necessarily captured in the framework. We also have 2 workshops coming up, June 1st and June 14th, and we'll have more details on that closer to the date. But here we're hoping to take, say, an hour and a half and dig in deep on one or two topic areas so that we can really get a good level of input and feedback from people across the state who are interested in this. We'll also have a listening session on June 29th. Again, we'll have more information for you there, but this is an opportunity for anyone of the public to come and provide comment and voice any concerns or areas where the framework or the program more broadly resonates or doesn't resonate. And then finally, I'll drop a link in the chat with website resources. You may or may not be familiar with CWCB's, I should call it a library of documents because that is what it is at this point. But there's an extensive array of resources dating back to at least 2 years, I think, on demand management. And then finally, we'll send a follow-up email to you all with a lot of this input captured and make sure that you are both prepared and aware of how to engage. So with that, are there any other questions about what next steps look like or how you can get involved?
Okay, group, chime in, raise your hand. Callie.
Thank you. Really appreciate the information here. So I'm just trying to be more clear. Where would be most helpful for you to have feedback from our group once we go through and compare it to our principles? How would you like that feedback?
That is a great question. And I think that there are a few different options. And honestly, I would defer to some extent on the group and your timing on that. But you know, one option is to come to one of these workshops and we can kind of talk through them. If it's kind of more of a discussion piece. If it ends up being more of a document that you would like to submit, you can certainly do that. We do have a demand management email address specifically set up to receive comments, so we can provide that. But you know, maybe as your discussion is developing and you consider if further discussion with us would be warranted as you're thinking through it, or what your preference is there, you can let us know and we can talk a little bit more. Does that sound okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? Feedback? All right, here. I'm talking and I'm muting myself. Hearing none, you know you're going to hear some more feedback from us. So, and we anticipate working well with you. So, anything else that you have for us this evening? All right, thank you. As always, thank you very much, Amy. Emily, pleasure visiting with you with our group tonight.
Thanks so much for having us.
Okay. Next item. We've got a request, and I believe it was kind of seated at the last meeting about change to our bylaws to include the Great Northern Water Conservancy District. They're a district, but they're getting more organized. And I know Jeff Comstock is part of this, and I don't think Jeff is with us this evening, but I know Doug is here, and Doug is working closely with that Water Conservancy District. And I would like to turn to Doug to let him visit with our base roundtable here on what they have in mind, because I think we're looking at a change in our bylaws to include another seat.
Thank you, Alden. It might help to have a little bit of history on the Great Northern. The Great Northern was formed in 1964. Generally, its geography includes fortification and Elkhead Creek drainages, also including Elkhead Reservoir. It is in Routt and Moffat counties. It hasn't had an active board since the 90s. They lost 5 board members in the late 90s that deceased, including the attorney in charge. So things didn't get rebooted very quickly, that's for sure. Anyway, it's going through a restoration, let's call it. I'm requesting a new seat at the round table for the Great Northern Water Conservancy District, and I'll need a motion to move forward as it does require an amendment to our bylaws.
I guess I would like to add into there, if I may, please. I know we'll open up the floor here in a little bit, but as part of the the creation of the basin roundtables, that does include water conservancy districts. And I'm not sure why Great Northern wasn't part of that. I'm really not sure. But I do believe it's very appropriate and applicable to have them be at our table for them to appoint a representative on their behalf. They've got some work coming up ahead of them, it sounds like, and they need to be part of this process. So with that, questions, comments, a discussion item.
Oh, can I ask oh, go ahead, Deirdre.
Go ahead. Okay.
Go ahead.
Doug, I have a question for you, and
Sure.
which is anybody currently sitting on the roundtable that is a member of that conservancy district?
By state statute, there are 2 holdovers. One of those 2 is myself. And right now, the courts have all the applicants. And I think we'll be hearing shortly from the court as far as having a seated board. So to answer your question specifically, I would be the only one.
Okay, so you currently are a member, but so they have not been, I'm sorry, I'm a little, still a little confused. So the court is in the process of recognizing this entity and evaluating which individuals might be members of that district. I guess my question is it a little premature until the court has recognized it? So that's kind of a follow-up question.
Well,
But you are currently
it's not a matter of, so it's not a matter of whether the district is recognized. It certainly is. And it's a matter of having a quorum and a seated board. So those public notifications went out, time passed, we collected applications. They were submitted to the court, or actually they were submitted directly to the court. And that's where we're at. So it's not a question of whether the district is recognized. It is fully in place. It's whether it's had a seated board. So that's what we're waiting for. Myself, I don't think it's too soon, as we're already having conversations about things in the near future. In fact, we recently had conversations with Andy Mueller and Kevin, the DWR, the state engineer. Thank you very much. Yeah. And we're having conversations. There's no decisions have been made, but we're having conversations about our role going forward relative to augmentation plans. So I don't think we're jumping the gun, especially where we have these meetings every other month.
So just a follow-up question. Are there any applications in front of the court that are currently sitting on our Yampa-White-Green Roundtable? I'm just trying to get a sense of how much representation there already exists, not to say that that's not a reason to recognize, kind of get that understanding.
There are a few, yes.
Could you let us know who those are?
Well, until the court appoints them, it's you don't know that they're appointed yet. So if you're asking, are there people who submitted applications? That is correct. So you would have people you already know, Tom Gray and I think Chuck Roby, Jeff Myers, excuse me, not Jeff Myers, Will Myers. So a few.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is Monger. I guess it's kind of, I don't know whether this is a relevant conversation that we're having here, because the 1177 statute recognized the fact that the conservation districts were eligible for an appointment. There is a functioning district there, and yes, Doug Davis is a board member, as well as Tom Gray is a board member on that. Well, Doug Davis is a board member on the existing thing. I guess my problem here is I would rather have us, and Kelly Romero Heaney is the master guru of the bylaws. I would like to see the physical bylaws being presented to us to actually approve with that change, whether that's just the paragraph that included that, and that we actually vote on something that's in paper. I'm totally supportive of, I mean, we have all the rest of the districts included as a representative on the 1177 roundtable. So I don't think that's the conversation. Dual representative or whatever. So Doug Davis might vacate his open seat and then would be eligible for would be appointed by his district and make another seat available on the open seat as well. So I think that's my preference would be that we have an actual copy of a bylaw change that we get presented to us to approve, and that we move in that direction.
This is T. Wright. I second that.
Okay. So Doug, are you considering that a motion then?
I don't know if Kelly wanted to comment on that, but
I'm sorry, then let's hear from Kelly.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I agree with Doug. I mean, not only do the bylaws allow for all the water conservancy districts to have a seat, well, if we change it, of course, we got to specify, and then certainly this the legislation requires it as well. So that's, I agree, Doug. We're not really discussing that, but what I would ask is, again, if there's another seat created and if there's an opportunity for somebody that's already serving on the roundtable to step into that seat, that leaves an at-large or some other position available, would be great, because we've got a lot of folks that want to participate in the Basin Roundtable that are waiting for their opportunity to apply and get appointed. And so I think as we start to, we've got a happy problem, right, in our public education and participation outreach efforts. We've got a lot of folks that want to participate. So if that opens up a seat, we can get one more participant, fresh voice on the roundtable, I would really advocate for that. But that's neither here nor there for the motion.
Correct. Okay. I see.
Oh, and as far as, and Doug, I don't know how you feel, but if we were to vote tonight, just saying that we would amend the bylaws to add the conservancy district, I mean, is that sufficient? Or do we need to like write it out?
My preference would, well, I think that the Colorado Water for the 21st Century Act makes it really clear that water conservancy districts are part of the roundtables. So I would like, frankly, I'd like the motion to pass that it's accepted, but at Doug Munger's suggestion to have it in writing to vote on it, that wouldn't be my preference, but I would accept that.
Okay.
So I guess I would move that I will move that we add and amend the bylaws with a motion tonight to include that conservation district.
This is T. Wright. I second.
Okay, we got discussion. I know I got another hand up. Steve, you have your hand up, sir?
Yeah, I'm kind of following what Doug's saying. I mean, if I agree, I'm kind of following Doug Monger. I agree that they should have a seat. My suggestion would be to, between now and the July meeting, have the bylaws committee draft that into our bylaws and have it voted on and approved in July, so that in September, when we determine the openings, then we could post up for the November meeting, because we need to do that after the September meeting. the at-large and the Great Northern seat and whatever, I don't think there's a big rush to fill the seat because Doug Davis is kind of will be representing the Great Northern on here, but I think that would be the better way to go, is to just let it fall into our regular election process and have the bylaws committee bring us something in July to vote on. And then at our September meeting, we determine which seats are need to be filled and we can advertise for them.
So here's something you're not considering. Doug Davis may not want to be giving up his current seat at the round table.
Yeah.
And I think it should be a board decision, Great Northern board decision, who they choose to appoint to fill that seat. I don't think it's my decision to say that. I don't think it's the round table's decision. I think that would be Great Northern's decision.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that, Doug. I'm just saying right now,
Okay.
you've only got 2 people on your board. And at some point in the future, the judge will set the rest of your board. All I'm saying is, let's get it in our bylaws to get Great Northern named as a seat. We can vote on that in July. Hopefully by July or August of this year, you will have your board seated by the judge. And then we can figure out what openings there are. And it definitely doesn't have to be you from the Great Northern, but somebody from Great Northern will have to write the letter saying that whoever it is representing the Great Northern district on the round table.
So Alden, I got a comment.
It looks like Alden's frozen. Do we have a vice chair to run the meeting?
He'll get back. This is Tom. I'll just add, I kind of agree with you, Steve, except that really, it's my understanding the judge is going to appoint that board here before our next meeting. And once it's appointed the board will appoint its representative, whoever that may be, John Doe. And really, all we do is need to add it as another voting member. We don't have the opportunity to say we don't want you, because 1177 says that conservancy districts have a seat. So I think the motion on the floor is appropriate, that we add Great Northern as another voting member, and then we don't know who that is, but sometime soon, it's my understanding, we'll have a board and we will appoint the representative for Great Northern, and then